Hello, and welcome to Faith Through Love. My name is Joshua Olmos. Thank you for spending a little time and joining me here today. So, today I want to talk about communication, and in fact, lack of communication. Lack of communication is something that I've dealt with for a very long time. I'm not the best communicator, and it's actually something that the enemy has used in my life to try to destroy my family, and almost succeeded. But God is good, and He restores relationships and restores so many things. But I wanted to talk to you about it because I believe it's an important subject and something that sometimes we don't talk about enough, and sometimes I don't think we understand the impact that it has on us. And so, you know, communication wasn't a huge priority when I was young. Many of you know my testimony, and the ones who know my testimony know that, or who don't know my testimony know, I don't know that I was homeless for a while. And one of the big reasons why I was homeless is my parents ended up divorcing after 25 years, and my mother didn't talk to my father, and vice versa. And so one thought I was with the other, and the other thought I was with the other one. Neither of them were talking to each other, so they didn't check. And so I was left to fend for myself because I was with neither one of them. And so that ended up, you know, giving me about 8-10 months. Time is a little bit odd when you're it's hard to keep time when you're homeless, but it was about 8 to 10 months for me to find them. I found my mother, and then from there I found my father, and the Lord restored a lot of that relationship, which is amazing and a great testimony in itself. But um but the enemy really did use the lack of communication to hurt a lot of people, try to destroy me, try to destroy my family. Of course, there were other things going on with that, but everything the enemy does, he does to kill, to steal, and to destroy. You know, that lack of communication, if it wasn't for the grace of God, really could have put me in a place that I could have gotten killed or really badly hurt. And, unfortunately, when I got older, I actually perpetuated that same cycle of not communicating. And I'll tell you, it's hurt relationships, both with family, with friends, with coworkers. Not telling people when something bothers you or how you feel about something can really put a wedge because, when you don't say anything, when you don't talk about things, when you don't communicate properly, then your mind just wanders and your mind will just we tend to go negative. So just thinks of the most worst case scenario and the worst things and negative things. And sometimes the other people don't even realize that's going on in your head, and you're stressing about things, and you react to things that aren't real because it's all up here. And really, one word, one kind word, one effort to communicate could have changed all that. And so one of the ways to prevent the enemy from getting into those gaps and getting into those things is number one, to be intentional about communicating. That's not always easy, especially for myself. It wasn't easy to be intentional about communicating or wanting to communicate. It always felt weird because, as men and as where I grew up and the way I was taught, men didn't do that. We didn't share feelings. We didn't share how we felt about things or what we thought about things. It was more actions speak louder than words is kind of where I came from. And so you were a man of action. But I've realized now that that's not always the best way to address things. And, my oldest son is learning to drive right now. And I took him driving not too long ago. And we went driving for about an hour the first time. And when he came back from driving, it was my turn. We switched seats, and he was done, doing his practice driving for that day. He turns to me and he goes, "Well, I guess I'm not a prodigy," which I thought was hilarious. Getting in front of this camera, shooting YouTube videos, it's not always the easiest thing. This is actually very uncomfortable. It's interesting to speak to things and inanimate objects, even though I know you're listening, and I'm very grateful that you're here. But when there's no crowd, it's hard to get feedback. It's hard to really know what's going on and how people are taking it or what to say or which way to go. And so it can feel weird. And it's the same way. We're not going to be the best communicators right off the bat. We're not going to be, the best at sharing our feelings or telling people, you know, how things make us feel or believe, or trying to repair issues or having those difficult talks. But with practice, you'll get better. And without the practice, you'll wish you would have started long ago so you could have actually built those relationships or prevented those relationships from falling apart or having such a wedge in them. So number one is being intentional. It's going to feel funny. It's going to feel weird, especially if you're someone like me who communication is something you actually have to think about and be intentional about it, especially if, for me, I have a big project or something. I will be very, very focused, and it's really easy to block everyone out. But isolation isn't a good thing. Isolation will hurt you. And when you're so much in your head and you're not actually being able to talk to someone to know what they really think and what they really believe and what they really feel, then then it's really just speculation, and that's dangerous. So, number one is intention. And number two is, especially in the beginning, you don't have to share everything. You don't have to share, everything you feel and everything you're thinking, because sometimes, if you're a person like me, I'm sometimes an extremist. I'm all or nothing. I don't want to talk at all, or I'm going to overshare everything. And what happens is when you overshare everything and you don't like everything, and you're telling people that you don't like things, or telling people how things make you feel and do all that type of stuff, then what happens is some people aren't receptive to that, or they'll criticize, and then all of a sudden you shut down. And when you shut down, you're back at square one. Then the enemy gets to use that, right? He gets to use that as a tool against you, against the people that you love, and against others. And so don't overshare, and also don't overreact, because not everyone's going to understand. And there are a lot of people like us who weren't brought up to communicate. I'm really surprised sometimes, and I forget how I take things for granted. And the other day, I was watching a YouTube video about a kid who was showing, it was a young kid, probably 18, 20 years old, and he was showing how to make, screens, the screens that you burn for screen printing. And because I'm learning that myself, I haven't done it since I was a kid, and I thought it would be really fun, especially during this time, to pick it back up and make some shirts and do some stuff. Anyways, I'm watching this kid on YouTube to see if I'm doing it right and if I remember the correct, and get kind of a refresher. And he's starting to build, he builds stuff by hand, and he drills into a piece of wood, and the wood starts spinning around, it flies off, and he's trying to hammer things down, and it breaks, and it doesn't, and it splinters, and it's interesting because, he's trying to do it while holding the camera, but also you can tell he's not very familiar with tools and and power tools and hammers and wood, working with wood. You can tell that's not his strong point. And so sometimes I forget that people weren't like me, where I grew up, where, in the shop working and with metal and working with wood and power tools and stuff. So building things is kind of just like, oh, well, we don't have that. Well, we can't buy one. I'll just make one. I didn't want to spend money to buy a screen press, because they were like a couple $100. And I'm like, I have some spare wood laying in my backyard or in my garage. I'm like, I just built one. I just made one. And so sometimes we forget that not everyone is on the same level as us. Not everyone does things as easily as we do. And so having patience and, communicating also to be able to teach people things and also to receive things. And that brings me to my third point, is make sure that the communication isn't one way, that you're not just sharing your feelings, not just sharing what you think, what you believe, how you interpret this situation, but listen before you talk. Now, you still need to talk, because that's a huge part of it, but listen. If you listen to someone, you'll see where they're coming from, and you'll see sometimes those things are just misunderstandings. Sometimes those things aren't the way you think, and sometimes just by hearing someone out, you'll notice that you took it in a way that they didn't mean it that way. There's that story where they talk about that there's a man on a train. I apologize. There's a man on a train with two kids, and the two kids are just going crazy. They're just running havoc. They're running up and down the aisle, and they're causing havoc for everyone, and they're loud and obnoxious, and the father isn't doing anything. And he just has his head down like he's thinking, and he's just totally oblivious to what his kids are doing. And it drives everybody nuts until finally someone speaks up. And someone goes, "Excuse me, sir, like, you really got to take care of your kids because they're way out of control." And the gentleman just, he has his head down and his hand in his head, and he looks up and he goes, "I'm sorry?" And he goes, I'm like, "What?" And so the spokesperson of the group says, "You have to take care of your kids. Look at your kids. They're running around. They're driving us nuts." And he kind of like comes to himself, and he like realizes where he's at. It's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, guys." And he comes and gets the kids and brings them next to him and all that stuff. And he goes, "I am so sorry. We just came from the hospital. My wife just passed away." And it changed the atmosphere in that train. You know, what were rowdy kids, where all of a sudden there was compassion, because it wasn't that this father was negligent or he wasn't taking care of his kids. It's just he had had such a big shock that it overwhelmed him and it made him shut down. And so sometimes, and I'm not saying that all the things are going to be that dramatic or that intense, but sometimes the lens that we're viewing things through isn't the right lens. You know, sometimes it's just not the right time. Sometimes the other person's going through something and doesn't know how to respond, but they're taking it in. Sometimes they just need more practice. But if we react to everything, it actually hurts us. It'll hurt the relationship. See, the Bible says that the foot can't say to the hand that I have no need of you. See, if you were to only connect with people who are like you, if you were only to connect with the people who you understand because you come from that same type of area and that same type of culture, and not from other ones that you don't relate to, and you just try to cut them off, you're going to bleed out. There are parts that you were meant to be connected with that will die. There are parts that will be hurt. And none of us want to live with any regret that we didn't say something or we didn't do something. Take it from someone who knows, who's had relationships hurt and destroyed because of not communicating. You know, sometimes we think we're doing the best thing by holding our tongue. And I get it. If you're going to say something mean or you're just angry and you can't think straight, then yeah, hold your tongue. But the point is, it should be more about the relationship, more about being on the same page, more about loving each other and being together than about whatever issue you're fighting on. We can always try to understand each other. But if you stay quiet and you just assume for the other person that you know what their intent was and you know what they were thinking and you know what they wanted to do or what they meant by that action or by that or what they said, there are many times that I've said things that come out so much harsher and so much more abrupt than I really meant them to be, and have hurt people's feelings and had to go back and apologize. But you know, sometimes I didn't even know that I hurt people's feelings until later on when they pointed out to me. You know, sometimes some of my friends and I, we've joked because sometimes I say things and then they repeat it back to me in kind of a sarcastic way, and I realize, oh, I'm sorry, like that did come out really mean or came out harsh, but I didn't mean it that way, I didn't think that way. We want to make sure that we're being a part of the body, encouraging each other, lifting one another up, and understanding each other, because sometimes we're not going to understand each other and sometimes we're not going to see eye to eye, but we shouldn't sever that part just because it's different than us. There are so many things that could be prevented, so much hurt, and so many relationships that could be saved if we be intentional about communicating with one another. So I just wanted to share that with you today. I thank you for staying here with me. And if you want to know more about Faith Through Love or myself or anything, you can visit us at faiththroughloveom.org. And I will see you next week. God bless you. Thank you.